Welcome to Grieving Insomniacs. I am your host, Christy Haberman. I am glad you're here. Thanks for being a part of our community. A few disclaimers before we get started. I am a licensed therapist. However, this podcast is not to be considered mental health therapy or counseling. It is for entertainment purposes only and is not associated with my counseling practice, Christy Haberman Counseling Services. Thanks for showing up. Welcome to Grieving Insomniacs. This is your host, Christy Haberman, along with Kai the Wonder Dog. She's not clanking around today. She is in the background snoring, taking a nap. My granddaughter called today and said, I wanted to hang out with you, Christy, and I said, come on over. So I've spent the afternoon painting rocks with my granddaughter. And I will have to say that being a grieving mom has really changed me in that respect. I take every opportunity that I can to spend time with my loved ones, and it's time well spent. And I just so wish that I didn't learn that lesson the hard way. Because before, I worried more about getting my house clean, or I'm going on a trip to West Virginia tomorrow. I haven't packed yet. I have a speech to write. And instead, I took time for my granddaughter, and that's a real change. And I'm glad I took time for my granddaughter. I just so appreciate it. So I wanted to say thank you for those of you that are reaching out to me on Instagram and Facebook. It is so helpful knowing that what I say and what I talk about on this podcast is resonating with you all. And I do it because I want to change the way our society views grief. I was talking to one of my friends who also has lost a child. So Yvonne, if you're listening to this podcast, I appreciate the time we spent together this weekend. And we were talking about, she thought I was doing the podcast so that I could talk about my own grief. That's actually not why I do my podcast. I do my podcast because we need cultural change. We need cultural change surrounding the topic of losing a child. And as she said to me, especially when you lose your child to suicide, we have to change the cultural conversation. Now, it's only going to change if we talk about it. If we just put it right out there and say, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I'm doing. And I'm a counselor, and I talk to a lot of grieving people, but it's not right for me to talk about their stories. It's up to them to talk about their own stories. So I talk about my story, and I talk about what I'm experiencing, so people know they're not alone. I think it's just so important, because when I first lost Christopher, and I would tell people that I lost a child, they turned away from me. And people weren't as open back then. Granted, it was 11 years ago, but people weren't as open then, and especially where I live. South Dakotans are farmers, are stoic people. There's also ranchers. We don't talk about feelings. We don't talk about losing children. That's just not done. And I didn't have anyone. And thank God for the internet, because I could reach out through the internet. And slowly, I developed a network of people that I could talk to about losing a child. And that has got to change. In our society, that has got to change. And I know a lot of people hold back. They hold back because they get uncomfortable with their reactions for other people. But at what point do other people become responsible for their reactions to us? How come there isn't societal pressure for them to be accepting of us? That's the frustrating part. Like any other area of life, we talk about diversity and we talk about compassion, but we don't talk about it when it comes to relations of a grieving mother. And that is just heartbreaking. So I knew one other grieving mother that I had met not on the internet when Christopher died. And slowly over the years, probably because I'm aging, and my friend group is aging, I started to meet people. Some of them are still just virtual that were, they were Facebook friends that started to lose children too. And I started to feel not so alone. But I also noticed that I could empathize with them much better than I could before I had lost a child. So I really believe that like recognizes like. And so this was hit home hard again this week when I was introduced to a new person. I walked into a conversation that two people were having. They were discussing, they're sharing like women do about their children. I can't emphasize enough. People, we should not be connecting with each other over the fact of whether we have children. You'll have no idea what the burdens are that people carry. The people that have had miscarriages, people that have lost children in the womb, that have lost children to cancer, to suicide, to murder. You just have no idea. But it's one of the ways that women have connected for centuries. So I walked into this conversation between these two people. And one of them turns to me to include me in the conversation. We were just talking about our children. Do you have any children? I can handle the conversation up to this point. Yes, I do. I have 2 children. And she goes, oh, so where are they? And I said, well, Colin, my living son is 33 years old. I said, and my son that's dead, he would have been 37 this year. Conversation stops. No more talking about children. Ah, and I laugh. But I shouldn't laugh. I should not laugh. But what else do you do, right? Talk about a conversation stopper. Boom. That's it. Conversation over. We're moving on to some other topic. And she must not have been a very good body language person. Because I think after the first comment, when I started to tense up, you think that she wouldn't have asked me again. But she did. She wouldn't have continued the conversation. And it's just so awkward because this is someone that I'm going to have to interact with in my daily life. And what a difference it would have made if she had said, I'm so sorry to hear that. But no, no, that's not what she said. Silence. Conversation stopped. We just can't have that in our society. We just can't. And I don't know why it makes people so uncomfortable. Maybe it's because it's about death. Usually what I get, some people ask how he dies, which I'm fine with talking about. But I don't want to be forced into it. Like I've talked on this podcast before, I don't talk about my grief because I'm hiding my grief. I don't talk about my grief because I don't know if I can be vulnerable with you. And if I don't trust you, I am not going to share with you about my grief. So I kind of felt forced into the conversation, and I don't know how else I could have responded. Because I do have 2 children, and I'm proud of my children, and I love them. But I don't necessarily wanna talk about them with you. Now, if I had initiated the conversation, that would have been a little bit different. And it's just one of those reasons that reaffirms for me why this podcast is so important, why it's important that we need to change the cultural conversation surrounding grief. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I say it every episode, and I know it takes a lot of courage to talk about your experiences surrounding the death of your children. But I would love to tell someone else's story, share your story here on my podcast. If you're thinking about it, I'll support you in doing that. Just reach out to me on Instagram, Facebook, insomniacs@gmail.com. Sometimes I think that people get tired of hearing about what's going on with me, and um, they might have different things that they want to hear about. Because in many ways, I shouldn't say sheltered, but Christopher died of cancer. And there's a significant difference between someone dying of cancer and someone committing suicide and someone having their child be murdered or die in a traumatic car accident. Like those things, there's differences in that. And I would like to know and understand those differences. Like, what are your experiences? What are you going through? Because it's all important. And it's all part of changing the culture that we have in this country surrounding grief. And if you're from another country, I'd like to hear from you too, because I am really curious. Is the stigma of being a grieving mother, does that apply to all countries? Or is it just in the United States that it's more of a taboo subject? I am just not real sure. So this week, I'm going to do a presentation for work. And this is so far out of my comfort zone because since Christopher died, I've been hiding. And maybe that's part of the reason why I don't want to talk about my grief. I don't tell people I have a podcast, by the way. I don't tell people that I wrote a book. And I don't know why. I think part of it is because I hide. I'm not sure that I want to put myself out there, but yet I come on this podcast every week and put myself out there. It's just a weird dynamic. But I'm going to go. And this is the first time since Christopher died that I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. And I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. But I'm also very, very happy to do it. And I know that Christopher will be with me every step of the way, but I don't know if the rest of you, since you've had the death of your children, do you worry about dying more often than you did before? Because my anxiety is really kicking in, and I'm not anxious about, I am anxious about standing up in front of people. I shouldn't say that, but I'm more anxious that the plane is going to crash, that I am going to have a car accident, that I am going to have some harm come to me, and that, or worse, while I'm gone, have some harm come to my family, and I'll be so far away, and what will I do? And I know this is a natural result. In my opinion, this is a natural result of learning that the world is not trustworthy. And what I mean by that is that bad things happen every day. And after Christopher dying. I'm waiting for the next bad thing to happen. But I'm pushing myself out there. And I'm still going to go. And I'll work my way through it. But it's just weird. So I think what I'm going to do is imagine Christopher standing in the back of the room, because he would be so proud of me for this. He would be so proud of me. He would be, Mom, you go out there and you help those people. I know you could do this. And I know I can do this too. And I'm going to do it, and I'm going to be successful. And my voice may quaver. I may forget words. Those of you that have listened to my podcast know that I struggle with language sometimes. Not sure what that's all about. I don't know if the rest of you struggle with health issues after the loss of your children, but I do. It is still yet to be determined why I struggle with speech. I struggle with lots of things. I struggle with speech. I drop things. Oh, so many things. I have balance issues where I have a hard time walking. All neurological stuff. That's because I got a traumatized brain. So despite all of those things, even if all of those things happen, I'm going to trust that I will be successful, because Christopher would want me to be successful. So if you would, send me a message and tell me, what are you doing in your personal life to create cultural change surrounding your grief? Are you talking about it with people? Are you putting it on your Facebook? I cannot emphasize enough that people's reaction to you doing that is about them. It is not about you. It is about their inability to cope with it. And really, you can't understand why, because it's like, I'm the one in pain. Why are you reacting to this? And if somebody tells you it's all about attention, it's not. Because if we had living children, we would be able to talk to them all of the time. We'd be able to tell our friends about them. We'd be able to brag about them. And there's no reason why we can't still do that in death. So I'm going to cut it short because I'm running behind in time this week. I'll be thinking of you when I go to West Virginia. It is my hope that one day that I'm going to be traveling across the United States and doing speaking engagements. So I'm going to consider this practice for when I'm able to do that. And someday I hope to have meet and greets and having grief retreats all over the country. So this is a really big step for me, going and doing this presentation. So thank you for listening. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate each and every one of you that listen to my podcast, that are reaching out. Have a great week.